Jason Sands spent 22 years in the US Air Force. He achieved the rank of Master Sergeant. He, during his career, had interactions with downed UFO craft and even a non-human intelligence. He has appeared recently on a new documentary released by James Fox called The Program. And he's here today on Exopolitics Today.
You are listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome, Jason, to Exopolitics Today.
Yes, thank you for the invite.
Well, why don't you introduce yourself to people in terms of your 22-year Air Force career and what you did?
Sure. As you stated, I was 22 years in the Air Force. My first job was an airframe repair specialist, so I fixed airplanes that were broken. And after the first 3 years, I cross-trained into the intelligence career field. And that's when my journey through strangeness occurred. I spent a little bit of time in the program in the early 90s to midnight 1990s. And then I went on to do other things in the Air Force, joint planning and becoming a senior manager type person. And then I retired out in 2007.
So you want to tell us how you ended up being a first-hand whistleblower on James Fox's program? I think you were pretty much one of only two, or actually maybe the only whistleblower on the program. So you want to tell us how that happened?
Well, yep, I talked to James after I'd been through the process of going and talking and testifying to Congress in 2022 in the winter time. And I traveled to Washington, D.C. In early December of that year and gave them my testimony that I had been in the program, a legacy program that I thought I had some concerns about it from what I'd been seeing in the news at the time. And I was concerned, and I went forward for that reason, as well as the fact that I had been helping with the UAP Task Force Forum and answering questions there as well, because I had had another experience that was a face-to-face with an entity that I can't explain where they were from, but that was also another reason why I was pushed forward to discuss that experience as well. And I did my duty there. I felt like I gave them everything I should have to help them to investigate some of the things that I had concerns about. Then they wanted me to go through another couple of legal wickets and so on and so forth. And I got through all of that, and now that brings me up to date for this year that James Fox film is out. He did a really great job on that, and I'm very happy that he included me with it.
So a legacy program concerning these crashed UFOs and efforts to reverse engineer them. How did you kind of like get involved in that? I think it was around the 10-year mark of your career that
That's correct. Yeah, it was about midway through my entire career. So I think it was twofold. I think they were watching me when I first came in to work at the 67th, where I was, Det 3, 67th, and they kind of had been maybe grooming and looking at people to see who else could be part of the team that monitored the phones for the program, because that's what I did. That was one of my main jobs for the Air Force, was to do some of the assessments of the security for different commanders and so on. And they wanted me to be part of that inside the program. So they looked at me, they probably liked what they saw for some reason. I was a pretty good analyst, had some potential. And then I didn't know it at the time, but I ended up going up range with one of the people that was on the team that was already monitoring for the program, and he ended up I guess introducing me to the team at that point. And I quickly went in to get my polygraph and got onboarded after that, and then I spent about 3 years in the program with them running missions.
Okay. So can you tell us about Black Mountain at Nellis Air Force Base? What was the relevance of that location in terms of what you were doing at the program and non-human intelligence?
Well, the Black Mountain came up in the film with James Fox's film because that's where we were headed to the day that I had my encounter in the desert. Black Mountain is also where I received some of my technical training to do my job, because another part of my job back in the 90s was to help air crews from all around the world to survive in a wartime environment. And we would jam their radios and so on and get them to understand how to use their countermeasures and still be able to drop bombs on target and dogfight and do all the things they needed to, regardless of all the noise coming through their headphones, things like this. And we also got them to use their radars correctly and all those other things. So Black Mountain Schoolhouse is what we called it. And that's where you go for your training to learn how to train the air crews and how to use the systems that we have up there to make it a hostile environment for the pilots to have to live through. And get them to safely learn how to use their countermeasures and stuff. So that's what Black Mountain is to me. It's a schoolhouse, and it's also a place where I was traveling to when I had my encounter in the desert.
Okay. Now, Nellis Air Force Base is a huge military facility there in Nevada, and it adjoins Area 51, also called Groom Lake, Dreamland. So how did you end up working at Dreamland or Groom Lake?
Well, that was, as I was alluding to earlier, that I think the last piece of it was just going up range with my friend, and we were just talking, and we discussed Dreamland, and he kind of chuckled at me. But all the time that we were talking, he literally knew that he was in the program and that he was intending to perhaps invite me in. And that's when it really started, was that one trip up range. To go to replace a couple of people that needed to be replaced at Black Mountain, where they were running an exercise at the time, and he and I were both chosen to go up there to go conduct some of the training on behalf of somebody else.
Okay, so I mean, I don't know about the way in which transport is arranged on Nellis Air Force Base, but when you're talking about uprange, the impression I get is, oh well, you probably get in a Jeep or something, and you just drive up from Nellis to Area 51. Is that the way it works, or is there?
Yeah, we would check out our vehicles from the motor pool that was right there outside of. You'd walk out of our office spaces, and to your right was where they parked all the cars. They were Chevy Blazers. They were camouflage, 4-wheel drives, and they were just meant for good amount of dirt roading and things like this, because everything on the Nellis test range is nothing but dirt roads, very few paved areas. So that's why we use those. Now, when I went to Dreamland for the first time, that was an aircraft that flew out of McCarran Airport. A very closed off area of that airport is where those take off from. And I boarded that, and my journey through the program began that way. And I got oriented to the base. The base commander actually drove me around for the day, and I was just introduced to the program that day, and that led to some of the very strangest things I've ever encountered in life.
Okay, so that was the so-called Janet flight from McCarran Air Force.
Yes,
from McCarran.
Yeah,
Airport.
I think it's out there in the on the internet that somebody's identified that Janet is the air that was used.
I see, and so that lands there at I think it's Groom Lake, and so there's a lot of facilities there. And I mean, for people that know a little bit or would like to know more about Area 51, can you describe anything about Groom Lake without getting into any trouble?
When I was there in the 90s, they hadn't gone through their latest upgrades, but it was very, very old buildings, like they'd been built back in World War II, a lot of cases. And when we went into the building, for example, where the commander was sitting waiting for us, it smelled like a museum because the wood is old. The pictures, they look like they've been there forever. They could have very well been hung in World War II timeframes in the 1950s and so on. It felt very much like that. So it had a lot of old buildings, some new buildings smattered in between. Some of the new hangars and things like this were there. So there were some upgraded buildings, but many of them were very old.
Mm-hmm. Now, while you were stationed at Groom Lake or doing whatever work you were assigned to there, did you ever hear of another facility at Papoose Lake, the so-called S4 that Bob Lazar worked at?
Yes, I did, but that was later on during one of the missions. So yes, there is an S4 that it's very similar to what Lazar put out. I never visited there like he did, so he's probably got more information than I do. All I know is it was mentioned as a place that was part of the program.
Okay, so and again, the program involved the retrieval of crashed UFOs. So S4. As far as you knew, what Bob Lazar said was accurate, that it was, it had craft there that were being stored.
Yes, they did have some scientists and engineers working in a place at Papoose Lake, yes. Okay.
Now, there's another, I guess you would call him a whistleblower. He's a former Air Force Office of Special Operations, Richard Doty, and he says that S4 is just one facility at Papoose Lake. There's another one he calls S2, and he says that S2 is where the real reverse engineering of captured spacecraft is happening. Do you know anything about S2?
I know of an S2 that is near Talitha Peak. And there may be some reason for that to be part of the program. It's very close to the mountain range. If they have a tunnel system or even large bodied aircraft, they could fly something in to Groom Lake from there. There's also another aircraft landings area there that was used to help with some other parts of other things that they're doing there around Talitha Peak or Tonopah Gate. Yeah.
So according to Doty, S4 is more or less a museum where there is no real effort at reverse engineering. And so what Bob Lazar was exposed to was kind of almost like a deception program or some kind of PSYOP, but that the real reverse engineering is happening at S2, and that's where you have like the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and Boeing Phantom Works and that sort of thing happening there. So is that something that's, you think, accurate or not?
Well, I can't tell you everything that I've heard about the labs in the laboratory environments, what they're working on and things like that. But yes, I can tell you the possibility is very strong that S2, S4 are real areas, and they both are places where you can find some of the exotic technologies being tested and reverse engineered.
Okay.
So I can't vouch for what Doty says though, because it's not anything that I've experienced. What he says about S2, I cannot verify that is where the Skunk Works and everybody resides, because I just wasn't exposed to that level of information.
Okay.
All I know is S2 was mentioned, and I have been to a place known as S2, and it is in a good position to help transport material in and out of the test range. So it would be a lucrative place to do that, yes.
Okay. Now, you already mentioned that you were given a tour of Dreamland by the base commander. Is that the norm? I mean, a base commander, I mean, he would be, what, a kind of a colonel, and you were, I guess, were you a master sergeant at the time? Is that typically?
No, I was a staff sergeant at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, buck sergeant to staff sergeant. That was the rank I was at. So E4 was my rank at that time. But yeah, it was normal. All the other guys that I was being joined with, who were on my team, to do the analysis security assessments for the program, were with me. They all seemed to already be familiar with the process and that this was what they did normally. because I had to ask them getting off the plane, okay, where do I go? They already knew all that. And then they said, when you get done, meet us here because we're going to go meet the commander. So it was like they already had done this before.
Mm-hmm. Now, in the program, James Fox's documentary, you mentioned that NHI biologics have been recovered. So what do you know about those biologics that were recovered?
Yes, there were some terms used. I would say that probably that was something that was definitely a concern for me. That I was like, what on earth did I just hear? And I showed the other analysts the same information, and they were like very surprised as well. And because usually when we went out to any particular mission or a site to do our security assessment, we were not really told a lot. We were just there to piece it together like the enemy would if I was a Russian or whatever spy. That's how we kind of did our missions, so that we could give them a realistic security assessment that this is what any one of your enemies can find out if they tap your phones and monitor your gates or listen to the radios around your installations. And that's what we were assessing for them. And one of them at least described some kind of biologic materials and stuff like this. So yes, I know that does exist.
Mm-hmm. Now, around the same time you were, I guess, read into the program, there was Emery Smith was working at Kirtland Air Force Base as a surgical first assist, and he says he performed hundreds of tissue extractions on NHIs that were brought into Kirtland. So is that something you had heard, that NHI would be taken to another facility like Kirtland to be studied?
I did not know that the NHI were taking there, according to what your other constituent said. I can verify that Kirtland is one of the places that we would monitor, yes.
Okay, that's important, that the Kirtland plays a role in the kind of overall program that is occurring.
Yeah, there is a relationship there.
Okay. Now, again, in the program, you talk about a UFO that landed at Nellis Air Force Base in 1994. So, you want to describe that UFO? I think I even have a picture of it, so I can just do a screen share so you can maybe talk.
So we had driven up to relieve the previous 2 weeks' crew on this day. The previous week, on that Friday, is when a unknown craft came into the Nellis test range, and it flew right by the Black Mountain schoolhouse where we were working. And so a lot of the people from the previous week had already come back just before I was to go up the following Monday, and were very excited that this had flown by the schoolhouse. So that was something that a lot of the, at least a good 10 people or more had actually seen the craft, saw the video of the craft the following Monday, because when I went up with the next crew, they brought us into the same facility where the video operators were, and the video operators wanted to document, the people that were there, and had we seen the video, and they wanted us to all kind of sign our name and say we'd seen the video, and so on and so forth. And then we were allowed to go back up to Black Mountain. So this is when the encounter occurred also. But that's how it began. Our day began, was just from the previous week. The video operators wanted us to come up immediately on Monday and go see them and see this video of this craft.
And this sketch that you did, it's a very unusual looking craft. How did it look from the outside? You got the canopy open there. From a distance, how did it look?
To me, it looked like the front end. I thought it was a crashed helicopter, honestly, because it had a front end that was rounded like a Huey helicopter is, and it was a bit shiny, on the outside. It wasn't. It was more matte finish than it was shiny, though. But it was just there on the north side of the road, off the shoulder of the road, And there it was, but it seemed to me like it was some kind of crashed helicopter because I couldn't see the top rotors and I couldn't see the back rotor or the back tail, but it had this front rounded area that looked like a kind of a funny looking helicopter. And that's the best I could do because I'd been on range with the rest of the guys and we'd seen all kinds of aircraft on our training missions up there. So we were all very familiar with the types of aircraft. This did not fit anything that I knew of.
Okay, so you see a UFO that has landed or crashed there at Nellis, and then you see an NHI. So you want to tell us about this NHI, and here's the sketch that was shown in the program.
I drew this particular sketch. I'm an artist, but anyway. Yes, he appeared to be wearing military uniforms. He was running towards us as we were driving down a dirt road towards Black Mountain. And I thought he was in trouble because the color of his skin looked like an albino skin, but it looked bluish, like he was having hypothermia because it was very cold outside. And I was very concerned for whoever it was. And I thought he was a person just, dying of hypothermia. So we got closer and the guy in the passenger front seat says he's got no ears, and I thought that was the rudest thing I'd ever heard. I'm like, the guy's probably, really in trouble here, and here you are screaming he's got no ears. So I'm getting myself out of the car to try to, give him help. I thought I was going to have to administer self-aid or whatever, and or medical aid. So anyway, I get out and I shut the door, and sure enough, he's got no ears, and he's got eyes that are twice as big as mine. And I got really scared at that point, but fortunately he began speaking to me, and it calmed me down. And then I noticed also that he was speaking a language I didn't know, but yet I understood everything he was saying, and that was probably telepathic. And he was asking me for some help. He said his craft was damaged. He needed some tantalum to fix it, or a word that sounds like tantalum. And the only word in metal that I knew was titanium. And I asked him if that's what he was after, and he said no. So that was kind of it. And he also, so I just said, well, I don't know where to get these exotic materials. If this is what it is, I pointed towards Dreamland because it's just, not too well. You can see very far in the desert anyway, but I pointed out to where the mountain range to Groom Lake was, and I said they could help you. And he didn't like that answer. He said, no, I will not get anything from those barbarians. And he was very adamant that he didn't want that. He had a distaste of some kind with them, and I definitely felt that telepathically, that he was kind of disgusted at the idea. So I was like, well, the only other thing I could help you with is that, I know I'm taking college courses down in Las Vegas. Maybe my physical geologist teacher knows a metallurgist that can help you. And he said, oh, okay, well, where's that? Where's your college? And I just said, well, it's south and east from here, as the crow flies. And that's where you'll find Vegas and my college. And he said, okay. And so he got back in his craft. It took off over the roadway. And that's when I noticed that the rest of the passengers in the car were kind of in a trance or something, because they had this really strange look on their face. But then when he was finally in the air, this entity was finally in the air, then they all seemed to come to and become normal. And then we all drove up to Black Mountain, and that was it. And I asked them, hey, did you just see all that? And they were starting to deny it, I guess. And they did that pretty much all day if it was ever brought up that we saw anything like that helicopter, because they were curious about that. Some of the other people just didn't want to say anything about it. And then the ranking guy just flat out didn't want to talk at all. And he kind of warned us that we could lose our clearances if we start talking about this UFO again. So I don't know how much they saw, but like I said, when I did turn towards them, they did seem to be in some sort of a trance.
So this happened in 94, and you haven't talked about it until 2024. So that's 30 years you've kept your silence about that incident.
Yes. And I guess the first time I mentioned it was in the UAP Task Force Forum. They had posted the video that is available out there on the internet for anybody to pull down. If you look it up, it's called the UFO Nellis Range UFO Incident of 1994, and you can download the video from there. But anyways, yeah, that's kind of how it rolled out. Was just that the UFO incident is there for everybody to see, and you can kind of see a lot of reports that have been written about it as well. Some analysis has been done, but
now you mentioned the UAP Task Force Forum. Now that's different to the UAP Task Force that was established by the Navy. I think, what was it, around 2021 or something?
Yes.
So this is a forum. Where can people find it if they wanted to download that?
You wouldn't be able to find it. It's on a classified system, and you have to be in the intelligence community or the scientific community to be participating there. And then there's a lot of other people that had reading. They could read through there and read through the reports that we made. And there are other people that were contributors. I contributed a few times. I wasn't like prolific or anything, but on that particular forum, I posted about this UFO incident in this video, and then I gave my part of the story. I said, well, let me tell you the rest of the story. The video is from the previous week. However, this is what happened to me the following Monday, and that's when everything started. So the intelligence community and the UAP task force knew about my story. They were the first ones around in 2022, and that's when things started rolling. And they interviewed me. The UAP task force interviewed me, and this led to that. And by the end of the year, I was testifying before Congress in 2022.
Oh, okay. Well, and did you tell them about this crash UFO and the NHI that was?
Yes. Yes, I actually had 10 talking points, but I never got through them because we ended up talking about, my encounter or other strange things sometimes. But we finally got through the whole thing. It was a full day of nothing but interviewing on both the House and the Senate side.
So both the House and the Senate side have heard from you, a whistleblower, about a UFO landing at Nellis Air Force Base, a kind of non-human getting out, talking and interacting with you, getting back in and flying off, and they haven't shared that with the general public.
Well, they couldn't verify it, so they didn't feel like sharing it. I think later on, there's been other investigations that maybe were more suitable because their intent was for me to go also testify to Arrow when they stood up the following year. I had to go testify to them in January. So I'd seen them in December timeframe of 2022. And then in January of 2023, I had to testify a second time to Arrow and Sean Kirkpatrick. And then I had to do it a third time and file my ICIG complaint. And I had to tell them also. So I testified 3 different times.
Now, when you say they couldn't confirm your testimony, but you said that there is a video of that UFO that's been circulating on this UAP Task Force forum. So couldn't Congress get their hands on that video?
Yes, they did. They saw that. Yes, the UAP event was validated at that point. Nobody's since debunked it as not being real. So they were able to verify at least the video coverage was there. However, this encounter I had, it seems like the people that were with me, one of them has disappeared. Nobody knows where that person's at. And the other 2 were located but didn't want to say anything.
So, I mean, this sounds kind of like absurd to me that the Congress would have in their hands a film showing a craft that landed, that you say you saw, you witnessed, and you saw this NHO come out and talk in a language that you couldn't recognize, but telepathically you understood everything, and then got back in the craft and flew off. And yet they wouldn't accept your testimony as kind of like corroborated,
well,
even though the film.
It's not like they didn't believe me. At the end of the day, they've got to put money to an investigation. So they needed names, places, project names, and things like this that were more meaningful to them. This kind of golly gee whiz stuff really doesn't get them anywhere. It's just kind of like a fantastic story of me going up range one day in their eyes at the long. However, they were very interested to hear that. But at the end of the day, they have to put money where their mouth is, and they have to convince other senators and so on to do the investigation. So the desert encounter ended up being something that didn't contribute to that very well.
But nevertheless, you reported it to the Congress, to the Senate, to the House committees, and to the ARROW office and the UAP task force. So they all know that you had this encounter with an NHI who got back in that UFO and then flew off.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that was another thing. It didn't seem like anybody had reported it properly, because usually when that happened, the range would be shut down and they would be conducting an investigation, whether, it was a crash or some other anomalous thing that was occurring on the range. They would not even have let me drive up that Monday, is really what should have happened. So whoever took the video and leaked it to the press probably, I don't know what they did. They probably reported it properly. However, I didn't see security forces and a bunch of other things that would have been a flag to tell me that, hey, there's something happening here. It looked like a normal day going up range, in other words.
Okay, but the video is in the possession of the different congressional committees and the ARROW office, and
anybody can pick it up. Even you can do that. So yes, they have access to all of that.
Okay. Now you mentioned that this NHI that was piloting that craft was wearing a uniform that was very similar to a US Air Force uniform. That got my attention because I've been working with another an insider, former Army, and he was meeting kind of these human-looking extraterrestrials that wore US Air Force uniforms, but they had a distinctive patch. So, can you tell us anything about the uniform this NHI was wearing?
It looked like a plain uniform. I don't recall it having a name tag or a US Air Force tag. There was no insignia, no rank that I recall. It was just a very new looking uniform. And I thought that was kind of strange as well, because usually when you're going up range, I would always take like my dirtiest uniforms, my oldest uniforms, because I knew I was going to get dirty for the next 2 weeks, because you're just running around in all that dust and grime and setting up antennas and getting all dirty. So it was very strange to see somebody with such a clean uniform in the middle of the desert. So it was obvious he wasn't from around the normal crew.
But it'd be fair to say, if he's wearing some kind of Air Force uniform, that there are agreements between senior leaders in the Air Force with that NHI and his superiors.
Yeah, I've postulated with some of my co-workers and stuff and intelligence folks about the BDUs and why was he wearing them. One of them is what you stated, that perhaps he's in with the program folks, and perhaps he had gotten in trouble in his craft somehow, and it somehow he needed some assistance, and that he was given that uniform by those people that he was working for in the program. The other thing I could think of is, since his craft was seen the previous Friday, he was likely on that range, stuck on the range for about 2 days, and perhaps he encountered somebody else who thought, wow, it's really cold out here, let me get you something, to be warm. And so they bought him a pair of BDUs and gave it to him, so he wasn't cold all the time, because it may have been that was the case. And the other reason I say that might be the case is because there was a woman, after we had viewed the videos and we were leaving the facility, she kind of grabbed me and she said, there's a guy on the range, and don't talk to him. I could tell she was very upset. So she may have known about it, and maybe somebody else also was there that knew about it, and maybe one of them had given a uniform to him.
Mm-hmm. Now, what you just said just reminds me a lot of another whistleblower, Charles Hall, who also worked at Indian Springs, Nellis Air Force Base.
Yes.
And he was a weatherman, and he was doing some work out there at Indian Springs, a remote part of Nellis. And he says he encountered these NHI that he called tall whites. And here's a picture of them. So, what do you know of Charles Hall and his encounters with the tall white?
I have seen his entire video, which is quite long, but I agree that I can vouch for the fact that I heard the terms tall whites and grays used, and a small amount of reptilian mentions during my missions. And the other fact that I know he was telling the truth, and why I give credence to Mr. Hall, is because when I was going around doing my tour with the commander for my first day on my orientation round with him, he had mentioned that there was a weather station, and he pointed at it and said, "Do you want to go up there?" And I said, "Well, is there something I should see?" And he's like, "Well, no, it's just a good place to go." He said, "But that's a unique position." He said, "The person that works there, they have free run of the base. They don't need permission from me to go anywhere." And that's exactly what Mr. Hall said. And I was like, when I heard his rendition of the story, it just brought to light everything I'd been told, and verified. I could verify that, what he said about his weather position not needing to get permission to go to all spots on the base, that he had free roam. That's exactly what the commander said.
Yeah, can you maybe explain that? Because, I know with a lot of military bases, some areas are very secure. You need the proper classification, or maybe compartmentalized access to a particular area. But here, when it comes to NHI, it appears that the classification is different, almost like, as you were saying, kind of like free range. Why is that?
Well, twofold in my mind. If there is an NHI presence there, as Mr. Hall claims, it's probably run like an embassy. In other words, you walk into the Russian embassy around here, for you and I, it's like you abide by their law when you're on the premises. Just like we have an American embassy, same thing. You go to the American embassy, you're treated like an American. Because it makes no sense to me that you have a higher technology race, as Mr. Hall outlines, living there in the mountain range nearby. And that is what I would think the military or the government has ceded to these peoples from another planet or wherever they're from. According to Mr. Hall, that's where they're told they can live. And they would probably wish that they were treated as they were back in their hometown or their home world. So that's first thing. The other thing is just that they would also have to have some kind of an agreement. That's the other piece to it. And that would have to likely go up the chain, but at the same time that they're doing things that are waived. In other words, the Congress doesn't even have to watch over them as they normally would. They have a waived program. So there's some things that they answer to. And the only times they really pay attention to all the rules in our world is that they are in unclassified world. They don't have to abide by all those rules unless they need something from a governor or senator. In other words, they need more money or resources. So they have, for twofold, then, yes, they could pretty much give the Heisman to anybody that's looking in from the outside, but they probably take advantage of the fact that they can live in both their world and ours, or in the other world where nobody else is in that classified world, that they play it both ways.
Now, Charles Hall talked about the agreements between these tall whites and senior Air Force leaders, and he talked about how the tall whites helped the Air Force develop kind of atomic-powered flying saucer craft that were capable of flying to the moon and Mars and elsewhere in our solar system, but didn't have the capability of interstellar flight that the tall whites had. Mm-hmm. So do you know anything about that?
I only know it from Mr. Hall's account. He seemed to have more in depth on that. The only thing I can add is that, yes, I did hear that the tall whites and the grays did help in some laboratories.
So would you be in agreement then that whether we're talking about the Air Force or the Navy, that going as far back as the 1960s, they did have some success in reverse engineering some extraterrestrial spacecraft, as opposed to, many people are now saying, well, there's no evidence that corporations have successfully reverse engineered any spacecraft, but Hall and others are telling us a different story.
Yeah, I would say that, yes, that's correct. I guess I would also like to go back a little bit with the laboratory environments that I heard that these tall whites and grays were in, is that they were very loath. When I heard of it, they did not even want to see a human in the laboratory while they were working. So to me, it meant that there were some limitations to what they were willing to offer as technology. There were some things that they didn't want us to see. Even the ones who had an agreement with the program folks didn't want all that full context. So it was not a free-for-all game. So that's the one part where I don't beg to differ from Mr. Hall, but it's possible they helped with some atomic energy and things like this, but I can't vouch for that part of the whole thing. Now, all I know is that the laboratory that I know of, they did not. It was a tenuous situation where the NHI, if that's who they are, wanted have a controlled environment.
Mm-hmm. Now you spoke about the UFO that landed there at Nellis. Now the Legacy program also dealt with crashed UFOs. So were you ever sent on assignments to areas where there had been a crashed UFO anywhere in the United States?
No, I had early on when they invited me to the program. Yes, they did ask me if I wanted to be on a retrieval program. They described it to me. I was leery of it because I was like, well, number one, it sounds gross. Number two, I could be picking up hazardous material, and I don't care what kind of PPE or protective gear you give me, I could die. And I didn't like that because I was just getting married, having my first two children. And I didn't want to end up in a situation where, dad gets sick and dies, So I had all those things running around in my head. So I said, no, I'm not interested. But I know that it exists because they did ask me to be part of it.
Now, there's another whistleblower. He's unfortunately deceased by the name of Clifford Stone. And he said that he served on a crash retrieval team. And he said he served from 1969 up until 1991, and so he said it was under the names Project Moondust and Project Blue Fly. Have you heard of either of those terms before?
Moondust, yes.
And Moondust has been shown to exist. Freedom of Information Act has confirmed that Moondust does exist, but it was explained away as well. They would seek foreign technologies like from Russia or China, like Russian satellites that crashed. But do you know about Moondust being connected to extraterrestrial craft?
No, I don't think it was extraterrestrial. There is a retrieval program for also adversarial crashes and or defections and things like that because. They had reverse engineering on Russian and Chinese craft as well, or whatever else they have in their possession. I don't know what it is, but whatever they happen to capture on the battlefield or whatever. I just happen to know that I know there's been some defectors from Russia that they ended up getting, that ended up in the United States hands. I'm sure they got their hands on it and tested it. So there is a vanilla side to it, and there is probably an NHI side to it as well on the retrievals.
I see. So Moondust, definitely, as you said, has a kind of more conventional explanation.
Which one? I can't verify if it's the same mission term because it's not a code name. It's not a classified code name. It was just something they called, we're going to go out and do this, So it's a little bit different. It wasn't classified. It was just a code name to tell everybody we've got another retrieval to go out on.
Yeah. One of the other things I did managed to interview Clifford Stone close to 20 years ago now, and he said that he was given a first aid manual for extraterrestrial civilizations, and he said he referred to 57 different extraterrestrial civilizations that was covered in this first aid manual that he was given, because he was part of the crash retrieval team. He was part of the kind of initial team that would go in, I guess the first responder team that would render first aid if needed. So have you heard of anything like that? A first aid manual?
There is a group, I believe there's a group that I really didn't know how to correlate the phone call. I didn't have a lot of corroborating evidence, but yes, there was a mention of a what they call the meeting of oracles, and there were at least 12 to begin with. It whittled down to 9, and then there's only 3 on it right at this point. But it was something. It came up as a sort of a really strange topic. But I think what they were referring to, and this is just my opinion, but they were referring to something that's been going on for quite a long time. That there's been some sort of an interface with us from the NHI, but they were called the oracles. And the reason I call them the oracles even now is just I've read up on things like the Mahabharata and things like this that mentions the oracles and how they would come and visit in ancient times, even like millennia ago, and they would meet with the peoples, and they were described very much like there were other beings from other places. So that could be the way that they interface with us over time.
Okay. Now you mentioned you've already testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee, and that's very interesting because I guess sometime after your testimony, and maybe if they heard other people's testimony, they came out with this UAP Disclosure Act in 2023 that the Senate passed, that the Senate adopted on voice vote, but the House didn't accept it and so forth. But the UAP Disclosure Act, I mean, it referred to some pretty amazing things in terms of non-human intelligence and crash retrievals. Was that language in any way influenced by your testimony?
They showed it to me, and I just suggested that they make it very specific, because some of the whistleblowers like myself, there's a lot of loopholes to get at us if you want to, take retribution against us. Yeah, and our protections need to be really spelled out. And I told them that. So I might have influenced a little bit, but there were several other people, I think like David Grush and so on, and maybe Lula Elizondo, David Taney Sheehan. I think maybe some of them had some hand in some of that legislation also.
Okay. Now, at the moment, I mean, we're having a kind of wave of drones hitting or flying over the US East Coast and other parts of the United States and even other parts of the world. So what do you know about these drones? Are they in any way related to these programs?
For me, I'm still analyzing, so I'm a bit on the fence exactly what's going on mission-wise. I am convinced that most of the drones are ours. They're either owned by federal companies or owned by the feds or military. That's what they appear to look like. However, amongst them are these orbs, and plasmoid-looking orbs that are very mysterious, and people are finding it really hard to explain how and where these orbs are coming from. And that seems to be in the more recent reporting that they're homing in on those orbs. Those are the ones that concern me, that if those are NHI, then there is something going on with them in the NHI. Now, I've heard other theories that maybe this is just an exercise with our assets to find a dirty nuke somewhere, or whatever you want to call it. And that they're just gearing up for those kind of operations because the federal government hasn't said exactly what they're doing with it or with these drones. So that's the big mystery at this point, is just what exactly is that mission type. I'm still trying to put my my best effort on that, but I haven't heard anything definitive. And up to this point, I think the government has said that, yeah, they're ours, but we're not going to tell you what they are doing.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of mystery to that.
Mm-hmm. So the whole kind of missing nuke hypothesis that has been proposed, there was you probably saw the video as well as I, there was some drone contractor or manufacturer that said that he was given information from someone who knew that this was a hunt, or that they were trying to detect some nuke that was smuggled in from the Ukraine, from the Soviet era.
Those are all logical conclusions to make at this point, and good analysis, points to ponder and to keep track of, and see if things start to prove this theory or this other theory as we go along. So yeah, I'd be very open-minded to the nuclear monitoring and searching by the drones, and or looking for bad guys, kind of a mission type also might be another logical conclusion. So it's really not there's only like a handful of theories that I think actually fit the logic of what might be going on. And NHI actually is one of them, though. It's like, what are these things that are flying around that we can't explain amongst all the drones? That's the part that puzzles me.
Right. Yes. The orbs and people. There was actually even a paper by Sean Kirkpatrick and Avi Loeb where they speculated that the orbs that were actually being sighted all over the world a couple of years ago, that was one of the Arrow reports said, I think 48% of UFO sightings that couldn't be explained were actually orbs. One of the explanation was that these were coming from some mothership in space. And that was Kirkpatrick and Avi Loeb that suggested that. So I think it's definitely something that needs to be considered.
Yes, and if that's the case, then yes, there may be an uptick in the activity because they see something coming. Either they don't seem to be threatening, and I agree with the government in the fact that there doesn't seem to have been any threatening moves by these orbs and these mysterious orbs, whatever they might be doing, that they seem to be observing. Maybe even doing some sensor analysis of their own with whatever they have on inside these little orbs. And it could be related to what Kirkpatrick said about there being a mothership out there in orbit.
Right. And also there was at least one police report about some of these drones, up to 50 drones, coming up out of the ocean and then flying over parts of New Jersey. And Ryan Graves, he also, I guess he's a kind of a Navy pilot. He is an expert on UAPs. He says that he began experiencing these UAPs back in 2013, and that they were originating from somewhere out at the ocean. So do you know of any classified drone technology that's transmedium that can operate underwater and actually in the air?
I do not know of anything like that. Even from my mission days in the program, that I had never heard there was a transmedium type craft. I knew they were working on certain types of airframes and stuff and prototyping those, but I'd never heard one that was able to transcend space, air, and land and water all in the same go. That to me is a brand new one on me, but that's exactly what we're starting to see in some of the imagery and the reports.
So could these craft coming from under the water, flying over New Jersey and being seen all over the place, could they be NHI?
I would say yes. If we were an intelligent race and we were out there and we found another intelligent race that was further behind us technologically and we didn't want to disturb them, we would try to hide ourselves and obfuscate it maybe in land or water-based bases that they weren't able to, dive to those depths, or underground in tunnels and build ourselves a facility and have a base of operations in places that were hard to find, hard to see, where we would be out of the way, but we could still conduct our research. So, it's a very logical conclusion that the NHI would similarly maybe have, especially if they've been around for millennia, they've had plenty of time to build those facilities and stay out of sight.
Okay, so I want to kind of finish up by just going back to the program that James Fox released on video, and it features you prominently in there. So, what's the reaction been? What's it like to play that kind of role?
It's much like my own. I am so completely in awe of James Fox's skill set as a director, producer, and everything else he does. He's just not only a great person to know, but the skill set. To me, he puts really, really good films together. So the accolades that he's gotten are probably going to do nothing but increase, because he's done such a stellar job putting together a great storyline that is cohesive. It has the right people in it, and he's telling the story as it is now, how far we are down the road and what's to come that we need to tackle. And you can see that. So I would suggest that everybody kind of go see that movie and of James Fox's The Program, and really get to see what he put together, because there's a lot of folks there that are just going to surprise you with what they have to say.
Okay, so people can get The Program on Amazon Prime and Apple TV. Those are the two places I know. Mm-hmm. Jason, I want to thank you for being on Exopolitics today. Any kind of final words, or if people want to get in touch with you, anything you want to direct them towards?
Yep. I sometimes am going to be doing spaces on X. That's where, I love the freedom of speech there. Sometimes people argue, but that's to be given. But most of the people I hang out with are not adversarial at all. They always hold a very respectful space. So you can find me there. It's Jason Sands is my handle on X. And if you want to get to know me more, then go ahead and friend me or follow me and ask me your questions. And I usually try to respond to everybody that asks me questions if I can. So that's how you can get a hold of me. And then if there's more to be done, or you want to tell me your own story and let me help you through your own whistleblowing process, I could help you navigate that as well. So just get a hold of me there, and we can start our secure communications at that point. And I'll securely protect you and everything else I can do with me and the people I know.
Okay, well, thank you, Jason, for sharing your amazing story and informing people about the nuances of the program. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, so thank you for inviting me. It's very nice.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.